I've kind of almost got the whistle down pat now. Hey, it's Brenda Meller. Welcome to my LinkedIn Live series in 2023. I'm calling this series Enthusiastically Unemployable. And I bring on really amazing people like Michelle Raymond to help those of you who are coaches, consultants, speakers, and authors. Hey, Michelle, how are you doing today?
I am fabulous, and I am excited that we're talking about something other than company pages today. So I love that we're going off script.
Yes, we're going to have a great chat today. And yeah, you and I were chatting about, about a week or so ago about what should we talk about. And we were bouncing around on so many different LinkedIn ideas. And I said, why don't we pick something a little different to talk about? And we started talking about your podcast and my goal of creating a podcast. And I said, how about we talk about podcasts? So that's what we're going to be talking about. You can see the topic on the screen right now, podcasting pros and cons. I want to invite our audience, if you're watching this live, whether you're on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or Facebook, could you do me a favor? Could you please drop a comment below and just say hi? Let us know that you are watching. This helps us to make sure that the stream is picking up. Sometimes StreamYard hands the baton over to LinkedIn and LinkedIn drops the baton and nobody's out there watching us. So it's just kind of like my mic tap, like, is this thing on? So if you are watching this, please drop a comment in chat and I'll pull your comments up on screen. And we also know, Michelle, that there's about a 30-second delay from the time I say that until the time they hear it. And then they have to kind of find their keyboard, type something in. So it might actually be 30 seconds to a minute. And then voila, we see people like Eleanor, right? Thank you, Eleanor. So I'll ask our audience to continue to drop their comments in there as we are getting started here today. Michelle, I know you because we've had many chats over the past few years. There may be people that are watching today, they don't know who you are. So tell us who you are, what do you do, and who do you help?
G'day, I'm Michelle from the land down under. I'm here in Sydney, Australia, so welcome from the future. I am a LinkedIn trainer that focuses on LinkedIn for business growth, so specifically LinkedIn for B2B. I've worked in B2B sales for 20 years and I've loved social selling on LinkedIn for around 8. I'm probably most famous for all things company pages, which is how Brenda and I crossed paths originally, and we're both fans of trying to work out how to make them work. And essentially, I just love, helping businesses, marketers, digital agencies to get the most out of LinkedIn, sell more, spam less. That's my goal.
That's awesome. And I love how you're getting so good at your elevator pitch. I mean, I
Thank
remember in the
you.
beginning it was, I think a lot of us do this. It wasn't bad. It was a lot. And you're
Oh
getting
no.
tighter and tighter in on your description as your business, and I'm sure your career is becoming more and more successful. It's really exciting to see the evolution of Michelle Raymond. It's happening live in front of us right now here.
It might not seem like a big thing, but that's taken me 2 years to get to that point because I was always like, I love helping everyone. Just like, when someone says, like Michelle Griffin tells me, niche down, company pages were easy. But when they say, what's your ideal client? And I'm like, any business owner in B2B. And then I realized I know better than that. And so this is where I've been on a journey so that I can actually say, here's who I help. So thanks for asking the question.
That's awesome. And we're going to jump in and we're going to have a great conversation today. I'm going to put the topic back up on screen for everyone. We're going to talk about podcasting. And there may be those of you that are watching right now that are considering starting a podcast. And I want to invite our audience, if you're listening to this, whether it's live or in playback, I would love it if you could tag someone in who may be a consultant or a coach, somebody who's thinking about starting a podcast, because they're going to definitely get some great value out of this. I'm going to use this a little bit selfishly for myself, Michelle, because I, as you know, have set a goal. Like, this is going to be the year that I launch my first podcast. And I want to learn from the best. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, yours included in there. So let me just start off by asking, where are you right now with podcasts? Like, kind of lay the land out, if you could, for our listeners.
So there's probably 3 parts to my podcasting strategy. So I have 2 of my own, one which I'm the host and I have guests on to interview, similar to what we're doing here today. And that's LinkedIn for B2B growth. And that show's evolved. It used to be called Good for Business Show. And I'll talk about why that's changed going into this year. I also have one, and I can see Michelle Griffin's joined us, the LinkedIn Branding Show with my other half of Michelle Squared, M1. That's one that we co-host together. So that's an ongoing weekly one that it's just her and I discussing branding topics. And then I guess there's also another piece where guesting on other people's podcasts is part of my strategy as well. But today we'll focus on the first 2, what I've learned being a host and a consultant slash coach over the last 18 months in my podcast journey. Because, Brenda,
Mhm.
if I can impart some things that I wish someone had told me 18 months ago, because I'm going to put my hand up. Here's how I got started in podcasting. Michelle Griffin, who we've just done the shout out, she came to me, I don't know, ages around that time. She's like,
Mhm.
we need a podcast. It builds your thought leadership. It's really great. You know, you've got to do it. And I was like, I don't even listen to podcasts. They put me to sleep. But I was like, if you say it's a good idea, I trust your advice. Off I went. And I'm a dive in the deep end person and work it out because I like to work things out for myself. And I'm going to share why I don't encourage other people to do that, and how you can save yourself a lot of time. But
Mhm.
ultimately, why I wanted to do it is because here's what I realized 18 months ago. I was creating all this content in social media posts, specifically on LinkedIn, that would disappear down the feed. And I was
Mm.
like, it's such a waste. It goes down the drain. And even if I repurpose it later, other people won't really find it. But I thought a podcast is something that lasts forever. And, you know, it would be a permanent record that people could discover me off LinkedIn. So I kind of spread some of my knowledge and spread my audience and didn't have everything in one basket. But my original reason for doing it, I'm not going to lie, it was just because Michelle told me it was a good idea. And I 100% agree, it is a good idea. Um, but there was probably some other steps, which I just, she'll just be in the audience here today, just laughing, going,
So
"Yep,
let me ask
Michelle,
you,
you're in
Michelle.
the deep end."
So let me ask you, because I hear you, like I've been talking about this podcast for a while, and I've been kind of like shopping the idea around with people and trying to figure out my topic and my title. And most people have been very and receptive, and even like some people assume my LinkedIn live show is a podcast. And I've been doing this for they're like, when's your next podcast coming out? I'm like, I don't have a podcast. Oh, that thing. And then I was talking to one individual recently. She's a consultant, and she said, "Don't do a podcast. You don't want to do a podcast. It's too much extra work. It's one more thing you have to do." So, Michelle, like, talk to those people that are kind of like, and we're here talking about the pros and cons. Like, what are the reasons you should think about? What are the right reasons, and maybe what are the wrong reasons, or
Mm.
what will you be losing or giving up by doing a podcast?
For me, originally mine started similar to this, a LinkedIn Live that I discovered you could use a program like Descript and pull the
Mhm.
audio off it and repurpose it. And that's originally how I started doing all of my podcasting. Another way that I could repurpose content that I'd already invested so much time inviting people to the live, setting them up, you know, making sure that the audience was there. And so I wanted to stretch my content further. And I think that's why podcasting is a really good idea for consultants and coaches to think, how can I have my thoughts out there that will last longer than what's a post last on LinkedIn? 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe a couple of weeks, something pops up later. But realistically, a podcast is there forever and they're not going to disappear. And someone might find you 2 years down the track, an episode that you did, you know, back in the beginning. And so for me, yes, I hear how much time does it take, and can it take you away from your focus? There's probably some things that in the beginning, because again, I pride myself on being able to work things out. And that
Mhm.
comes from, I moved out of home when I was 18. I had no money. When I needed to fix things, I always worked out how to fix them myself because I had
Mm.
to. Fast forward, you know, 25 years, and I'm older and wiser now, and I have my own business. And sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes that's a curse.
Right.
It's really easy to take this LinkedIn Live, import it into Descript is the program that I love and use. It's so easy to edit
Did I
and
get that right?
export
I
the
just put the
audio.
link up on screen,
Yeah.
descript.com. Okay, want to make
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
Descript, I could not create content in general without it anymore. So
Mm.
it's able to chop up videos into smaller parts, rip out the audio, create text. It's just amazing, right? So
Okay.
it's my number one tip. If you're going to do it yourself, you need Descript because
Okay.
having the right tools saves time. Now, I tell you that now, but that took me, I don't know, 3 or 4 months to try and research and figure out in the beginning. I
Mm.
also trying to work out which platform was best, you know, which
Yeah.
was easiest. And like you, I shopped around. I
Right.
was like, what do you use? And what do you use? And I got so many different answers. And so I went to one of the most popular, which was like, you know, Buzzsprout, I think was one of the most popular at that time. For whatever reason, Brenda, that interface just did my head in. I could not
Talking about
work
Buzzsprout,
it
the
out.
Buzzsprout you didn't like?
I didn't like it. And I
Okay.
don't know if I went back now, I would have the same thing because it was just
Mhm.
at that point in time, it just didn't work. So I used something called Anchor FM, which is
Okay.
so
I've heard of
simple.
that. Yep.
But I've then learnt there's some downsides to Anchor FM. And so I've recently moved my podcast. But these are the things I've learnt along the way. And I wasted a lot of time trying to figure it out. I'm not going to lie. But there's things before you even get to tech, before you even start creating the podcast. The lessons I've learnt came from all the things I should have done before I even pressed record. And I
Mhm.
can't wait to share about that.
Okay. So I know you talked about Buzzsprout, Anchor FM. I'm leaning towards Buzzsprout because when I asked around, like Buzzsprout kept coming up and there was Libsyn and I'm on Kajabi, which has a podcasting platform, but Mark Struczewski, I'm going to give him a shout out. He's a heavy Kajabi user and he's like, don't use it. And I'm like, I rather learn from those people who've gone before me. And it sounds like yours was just a personal preference. You weren't crazy about the interface. And, there's pros and cons. And by the way, Michelle and I are not super influencers were being paid or endorsed for any of these products yet. Maybe someday we will,
Yeah,
Michelle.
maybe.
But this is just based, I mean, and I think it's nice, it's genuine to hear. This is based on our own experience with these platforms. And by the way, if you're watching, if you have suggestions on other platforms, please drop them into comments. So we heard you say, why should you want to do a podcast, or why would you, was a good thing to do a podcast? The pro is to build thought leadership. And I heard you say, for people to be able to find your content, because LinkedIn, it kind of goes in there and it goes down the drain. And it's sad to hear you say that, but I hear what you're saying. It does. It kind of disappears. And people can find your podcast later. What are the cons of starting? I mean, it sounds like time and learning, and it's one more thing, Michelle. Do I have to do one more thing? Really?
Yeah, look, and this was me. I tried everything last year, Brenda. I wanted to have
Yeah.
my finger in every single pie: Twitter, Instagram, podcasts, LinkedIn Lives, creating content, writing 2 newsletters, whatever I was doing on my website. Like I had my hands in all of it. And what happened was someone, and I can't remember who it was. So
Mhm.
shout out to whoever actually wrote a post that said, when you're on all of these other places and you're not doing it well, that reflects poorly on your brand. And as someone that's more conscious of my brand now, Tuomo, another one of my friends on LinkedIn, he was on my podcast and he said something that has stuck with me ever since. Michelle, mastery comes from simplification. So this year, I've cut back lots of things and I'm just focusing on my podcast. And this is what I say to people: it can be really distracting, it can take you away from your zone of genius. It can be something that you waste time trying to figure out something that you enjoy, like you don't even know whether you enjoy it or not. And so there can be all kinds of wasted downtime if you're someone like me trying to do it, or there's a cost involved where you're going out and paying someone else. Now, my advice is absolutely do not go out and spend fortune on all new equipment thinking that you're going to love podcasting only to find out that you don't. And again, it's not something that you specifically need really expensive equipment. Quite often, what I've learned, you can have the best microphone in the world, for instance, but if you don't know how to speak into it, where to sit it, how to position it, it just sounds rubbish. And conversely, you can go the other way around and have
Mhm.
a really, well priced, my microphone was around 100 Australian dollars, nothing expensive.
Mhm.
But from that, knowing where to put it was a lesson. I don't know how many videos I watched. Roughly, you need to put it roughly that far away from your mouth, right?
So
And
for those people that are listening, what we're doing right now is you make like a Y, like your pinky and your
yeah,
thumb are sticking out, and you want to put it on your chin, your thumb on your chin and the pinky on the microphone, or
yeah.
vice versa if you want to go that way. Feels weird,
Yeah, so
but right?
the thing is that can make a big difference because if I
Mhm.
move back here and talk the same, then all of a sudden it starts making me sound weird and
Yeah.
takes away my credibility. Now, if you're
Mhm.
doing podcasting to build credibility, build your brand, and then all of a sudden you're terrible and don't have good sound, then it takes away from that. And that's also a danger for people. So think about what's your goal for your business, and then we work backwards and see how this actually fits into it. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't do that step. And this is why I want to share it with people. I did not have an ideal audience in mind. I did not have a target goal in mind of how I'd measure success. My original thing was work out how to do it, have some people on that were guests that I wanted to talk to. And here's the honest answer, because I like to be transparent.
Yep.
when I first started, I had guests on that I wanted them to almost be my friends and go out into the LinkedIn world and end up
Mhm.
being like a referral partner. And some of them, weren't from the LinkedIn community, but
Sure.
they were people that were local here that I thought they would help support me. And I've got to tell you, that's not what podcasting is about. I don't encourage it, but in honesty, that's where I started. And that's why I say to people, look, ideal audience, have a niche audience, you solve one problem and talk about that consistently. And I didn't do that.
Okay.
It was like I talked about good for business. It
Yeah.
was so broad. So it could be time management, it could be money management, it could be LinkedIn trainers, it could be podcast person. It was all over the place. And they were great conversations individually,
Mhm.
but it's like you went to the channel and you wanted to watch rom-coms, and I was giving you a horror movie one day, sci-fi next day, this next, and you were like, "Am I in the right
What is
place?
this
Like, what's
about?
going on?"
Right. And I find I'm into I've fully immersed myself into the research phase of things. So I'm like into the listening to podcasts all the time and asking everybody about podcasts and who would you recommend and looking at graphics and things like that. And I find like sometimes it's the same thing. It's like, okay, this podcast is supposed to be about this topic. And then I start listening to it. And either, sometimes there's co hosts that they just ramble so much. And I'm like, what was the point? They're like, click on to the next one.
Yeah.
But I feel like what I'm hearing you say is get really focused in the beginning on who your audience is, what are the goals that you're trying to communicate within the podcast, right?
Absolutely. And that's why the
Mhm.
second podcast that I do with Michelle, the LinkedIn branding show, is so much more successful for the shorter amount of time that it's been there, because it's really clear who we're trying to help, what we're
Yeah.
talking about. That helps with SEO, because even on the podcast search platforms, SEO is still a thing. It's not just Google that we worry about, search engines finding us. So, and SEO is a huge part of podcasting. You can't underestimate how important that piece of the puzzle is for your podcast to get discovered.
Okay.
And to your point, when you listen and things go, you're like, what is this rambling? I'm out of here, or the intro's too long. So my podcast go-to expert is a guy called Neil Veglio, who is over in the UK.
Mhm.
And essentially he tells me, Michelle, it's like, bull riding, you've got that 8 seconds. So if you do not catch attention in 8 seconds, they're out of there, right? Because there's so much choice on a podcast platform. So be clear about your audience, be clear about the problem you solved. And yeah, the LinkedIn branding show is really successful because it's obvious what we talk about. We only talk about that topic and how it relates. And so it's just so narrow, but that's what makes it successful. And that's why I've tried to change my podcast to
Mhm.
LinkedIn for B2B growth to narrow it in. I've still got a little way to go, but
So let me
yeah.
ask you a question because it was called Good Trading Co., which is the name of
It
your business,
So it was
and now
called
it's
Good for
called
Business Show. Yeah, so it was called
okay,
Good for Business
Good
Show,
for
which
Business,
is,
I'm sorry.
pretty broad.
Okay,
But now it's called LinkedIn for B2B growth, which is
okay,
also what I'm now talking about on my LinkedIn stuff as well. You'll see me use those words more often, not just company pages.
okay.
If I was smart, Brenda, if I thought about this back in the beginning, known as a company page expert, you think I should have been talking about company pages every week and created a podcast on company pages?
Yeah.
Hello.
'Cause you'd be the only one, right? I don't think anybody's talking
No one
exclusively
would.
about
I
company
would have
pages.
owned it, like,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying I won't go back and maybe do something like that, but that was the real opportunity that I missed in
Yeah.
hindsight. And this, again, I share all of this like you, it's learning experiences, but I
Mhm.
want people to understand I've learned since then, and you can skip the learning phase and just go, what do you want to be known for? And have it align with what you do on LinkedIn. Because
Mhm.
mine was like, why would someone come to me to talk about business in general when you know me as either a LinkedIn trainer or specifically company pages? Like, again,
Yeah.
on the wrong channel, right?
Right. Well, it's like sometimes we try to be clever and we're like we want to speak to the world, so we go so broad. Now you did mention SEO, search engine optimization. So and I'm hearing a lot lately about keywords and even your specific name of your podcast.
Mm.
And let's say there's someone out there who wants to create a podcast. Maybe it's by the same name of this LinkedIn live show,
Yeah.
enthusiastically unemployable. And maybe it's business marketing and LinkedIn tips for coaches, consultants, speakers, and authors. And she may know it's a little bit long, but that's what the show is going to be about. What advice do you have for her?
Look, that's the thing, right? It comes down to the marketing side. So if you
Yeah.
got to think, if your audience is out there and they're on a podcast platform, what will they type into the search bar to find and stumble across your
Mhm.
podcast? So not the
Yeah.
people that you can promote and leverage your network, which is what, 70 odd thousand on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
not that network, but who are the ones who will accidentally discover you on
Yeah.
the podcast platforms? Now, that's what I think. What will they type into the search, and will they find your show if they did it?
Yeah.
So, for instance, mine before, you could find every other LinkedIn trainer except for me, right? And
Mhm.
so this is crazy. I didn't even have my own personal name in the title anywhere, which again, a missed opportunity. Even if someone typed in my name by accident to see if I
Would
had
it come up
anything.
now? Is it in there now?
I don't know. I haven't looked. I'm hoping it would. You find often my guest appearances that I've done on other people's shows, so you can check that one out for me,
Okay.
because I think keywords are really important. I can see Michelle Griffin says that, the keyword subtitle is critical. Absolutely, I have to agree with that. And
So I typed
so
in Michelle Raymond and look what I found.
yeah,
Yeah, both of
absolutely.
you.
So
There you go.
this is the thing. Well, you can see one of my old podcasts, which I started, which I stopped, which I've got to delete. So thanks for that reminder, because what I used to do is read some of my LinkedIn articles and record them so that people could listen that way. They were much
Mm.
quicker. But again, that
Mhm.
was an idea I thought would work, didn't do any research, just jumped in, and now it's dead, which is what happens with the majority of podcasts. Great
Yeah.
ideas, go out of the gate hard, and then go, yeah, no one's listening.
I heard like
Podcasting.
7 shows is like a lot of people don't make it past their 7th show, and I've heard like when
Mm.
you go out, you should have 4 shows ready to go so that you've got like weekly content pushing out. Do you agree with that philosophy? Any
Yeah,
thoughts on
so
that?
I asked Neil about that on my podcast. So he's my podcast guy, as I said, and I asked him that particular question because it's something that
Mm.
I didn't do my research. And there's a lot of information out there that would suggest that. And what he kind of said is, you don't need to have that many, although it's good if you think someone is a new listener and they might want to binge listen to a couple of episodes.
Okay.
But he said the actual important part is, how are you promoting it in the 4 weeks before you start launching? And
Mm.
again, I didn't do any promotions. I just went, ta-da, here it is. So if you can ramp people up and talk about it like we're doing here today, the podcast is coming, the podcast is coming. What should my name be for the podcast? I'm thinking about this, and get people involved. Then when it actually drops, people are
Mhm.
like, yes, I'm there. But if you drop 6 episodes and then start telling people, they don't magically show up on the podcast platform. And
Okay.
so this, for me, the marketing side, which is your absolute expertise, we need a runway up until the launch date to let people know it's coming, so that when you launch, it's not
Mhm.
necessarily how many episodes, it's that they know it's going to be there and they can find
Okay.
it.
Okay, this is really good. This is really good. This is like, and we're gonna move into Q&A in a little while here. So if you are listening to this, whether live or in playback, and you have questions for Michelle about podcasting, learn from an expert. I'm gonna call you an expert because it's funny, like we use those words, and I'm like, I don't like to be called a LinkedIn expert because I feel like there's so many others out there that have more knowledge than me. But when other people call you an expert, I feel like that's okay. In my mind, you are an expert, Michelle, because you're so far ahead of me and so many others. How many shows in total do you have right now? Do you know that you have
So I'm up
produced yourself?
to coming up to 60-ish for
Mhm.
my LinkedIn for B2B growth show. And the LinkedIn branding show is up around 30-ish. So roughly.
Mhm.
So, I've done a lot of episodes. I've made all of the mistakes, which is why I share them with people, so that
Mhm.
you could learn from me and not go through that again and again. I thought it was all about the tech. I love tech.
Mhm.
I'm obsessed with it. It's my favorite piece. But even just, for instance, using Anchor FM, it was really easy. I could upload my podcast and I thought it was fabulous. I've since learned that all the SEO, I guess, benefits of a podcast actually go to Spotify, who own Anchor, and nothing to my show. So whilst
Mm,
it's free, whilst it's easy, and I could get it out there and I still had listeners, but there was no SEO benefits for me personally on my show. It all goes to Spotify, the way that they funnel it out. So
interesting.
now I've moved it across to Libsyn on recommendation, and
Okay.
Libsyn also has better quality sound, which again can help reflect on your brand. And so there's lots of little things that you learn. So I think for me, I was naive because it was so easy
Mhm.
to put it on and get it out there. So
Okay.
record a LinkedIn Live, press record, done. That's easy.
Yep.
Put it into Descript, edit, easy, although time consuming. So to give you an
Mhm.
idea, to edit a half an hour episode on Descript and get all the ums and ahs or things cut out takes around 3 hours, right?
Wow. 'Cause it's all the
Right?
start and stops and
And so why do I put that much effort in? I could just put it out there and not do it, but I use the transcript so that my
mm,
podcast is accessible for people who want to go and read it, and also it can help with some of the SEO stuff later on.
okay.
So if you want a good transcript, which I can then reuse in different places,
Mhm.
and it also helps with subtitles on videos and different things, but
Okay.
3 hours for a half-hour show.
Okay,
So if
good
you
to know.
start
So
to
and
think about this,
I know there's
it's
people
adding
out
up.
there that can do this for you, and I even have somebody
Sure.
local in the market who's offered. He's like, I'm like, I've
Yeah.
got like 200 LinkedIn live shows. I want to convert it to a podcast. I just don't want to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars doing this because I don't yet. To your earlier point of having how is it aligned to the business? I think other than helping me to reach another platform, which could allow me to reach customers, there's not a revenue
Mm,
stream directly tied to it yet. So part of me is like, I'm going to do this myself, but then I hear you saying a 30-minute show is gonna take me 3 hours of editing. Is
yeah.
that is that is publishing take a lot of time too? Once it's a
No.
ready to go file, does it take long to publish it?
No, it's literally export and upload really quickly, just like you would save on, like, your shared drive on your computer. It's really
Okay.
quite simple, that part. So what I would say is rather than do all those previous episodes, what fits under the enthusiastically unemployable? And
Mm,
just pick the best of the best, which you can go back and see the numbers and say,
yeah.
"Well, that was really popular." Bring
Mhm.
those ones across, but maybe not just bring everything. And
Okay.
the other thing I discovered when I first started, LinkedIn Lives don't necessarily translate to good podcasts. So if
Mm.
I go shout out to Kenneth Lang, who's here today, and he's not listening to the podcast, and the
Right.
people that are on the podcast, they go, "Who's
Who's
Kenneth
that?
Lang? Like, why is she talking out into the universe?" Now, the thing is, on the flip side, if you do it live, if I don't shout out and acknowledge that Jay's in the audience and involve him in the LinkedIn Live, then what happens is the live becomes a bit of a flop.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
then you have to cut that out of the podcast. So you can see
Mm.
how whilst it's easy, it can, the nuances can make it a little tricky.
Yeah, you gotta kinda consider both audiences, and I always think about live when we first started doing LinkedIn Live, when they first were hitting, LinkedIn, we were getting tons of viewership, and
Oh,
now we don't get as much,
amazing.
so I always tell my guests, I'm like, "Whatever we get live, we'll get double or triple by the end of the day, and maybe even, quadruple or" I don't know what the next phrasingology is, but we'll
Not
get a
me.
lot
I was
more by the end of the week, and it does live on YouTube, so I'll get continued viewership there. When we convert it to a
yeah,
podcast, we're gonna reach more people there. So I don't look at like if there's only, right now I'm looking at LinkedIn and it says there's 11 people watching live, and there's been people coming in and out. So there's probably more than like more now there's 12. I just said 11, now there's 12. There's probably more like 25 in total that have listened to a part of it. And part of it could be someone left work and I'm here in Michigan, which is in the Eastern time zone. It's 5:03 p.m. Someone left work at 4:55 and they started listening to a podcast, and then they got a phone call. So they had to stop listening to it, and they may watch the rest later. So I think when we take all of that, but what I like that you do, and you interviewed me for your podcast recently, we did it inside StreamYard. It was just me and you. And part of it, like, we didn't have to worry about the audience participation part of things. We were on video, so I had to be like still camera ready and everything. But what I liked about it is, to your point, you didn't have to edit that part out because it was just for us. But you
and
also recorded it on video and you put it on a YouTube channel, which I believe you had linked in your podcast show notes. Am I remembering correctly?
absolutely. So now I use a website which is called podcastpage.io, and that's my podcast website page. Now, to get it even more technical, it's what happens is I create my podcast in Libsyn, so that's where the audio part goes, and Libsyn sends that to all of the podcast platforms. So
Okay.
you've got Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, of course, and so it handles that distribution. So that's what Libsyn, Buzzsprout, those kind of platforms do.
Okay, so let me ask, I
Podcast,
just put it on here again, podcastpage.io. So this is what
one.
creates your podcast
So that's a
landing page.
website
Okay.
for my podcast. Now, what's really great, and I've just upgraded to this. Number one, it looks fantastic. Number two, it's easily integrated with Libsyn, so the information comes across automatically. I
Okay.
can now set up guest pages. So my participants, I can have their full bio, their
Oh,
social
cool.
connections, and make it so much easier for people to come across. Now, if you
Okay.
want to have a look at an example, I think I dropped in the private chat earlier, the podcast.goodtradingco. That is my podcast page.io, but it's now a subdomain on my website, to get a little technical, but it's got my own branded name in it, is the main point that people need to
Okay,
understand.
let me share this with our live viewing audience right now. I'll probably edit
For
this part
sure.
out when we convert this to podcast. So present, share screen. I have to like tell you what I'm doing because otherwise I'm going to lose track in here. And then I'm going to share an individual window. Actually this Chrome tab. I think this is the right one. Is this the right one?
Yeah, that's it.
This is your
So
podcast page.
here's why this is amazing. This leveled me up so much. Like, before, I would create a really poor blog on my website, and my website is not something I'm proud of. It's a work in progress, but this looks amazing. You can see it's branded, always important. You can
Mm,
see that people can easily find older episodes. They can subscribe, they can see reviews, and I
mm,
can direct them to different places. And
okay.
so this for me was a game changer. Why does it help? I have an interview style show. And so when people, I send this to them, they
Mhm.
go, "Oh my God, that looks great." And I look professional, and
Yeah.
so these are the kinds of things. So there's an amazing episode that people should go and catch, the Unleash the Power of LinkedIn Company
Look at
Pages.
that. I may just drop
Well,
this into the LinkedIn comments
let's
here for
just
people that are watching
so
today.
if you open that up, this is what makes it really cool. Number one, it's easy for people to download. Podcasts are measured by
Okay.
downloads. If you
Mm.
click on your little face there, Brenda, you can see that you, as a guest, have a
Oh, look
whole
at that.
page. And I can
Mhm,
get your speaker bio. Currently, I think it was like your about section or something, but I can get your
mhm.
speaker bio and update it so that people can come and reach out and connect with you. And
Cool.
so, again, it just adds credibility to the show. It gives
Mhm.
you an upside for giving your time to come on my show. People can listen directly there, they can download it, and that little share button also makes it easy. So, I absolutely, if you have a podcast, you need this. And again, that was
Mm.
recommended to me by Neil, and I'm very grateful for that advice, because it has just skyrocketed my professionalism behind my podcast, which is not what I would have rated it beforehand. But
Okay,
again,
so
learning, right? Always
learning as you
learning.
go. So I have to ask the question, cost of all of
Yeah.
these. I mean, which are these services, do you have to pay for them? Are there free versions that you can try out before upgrading? And I mean, we're here talking about, I'm going to put the topic back up on screen again, podcasting pros and cons for coaches and consultants. And there may be individuals who are considering, launching a podcast, who are a little hesitant about cost and time and all. I mean, and sometimes the trade-off is you pay a little bit of money and you save yourself a lot of time. Or
Right.
do you outsource it entirely and pay more, but then you can just basically wipe your hands clean? What are your thoughts there, Michelle?
Absolutely. So there's pros and cons for both. So on one hand, right now, it's possible for me internally within my own business. I can record it, I can upload it. Lil does the editing, because it really is that simple with Descript, and then we put it out. Now, that at some point when the business gets busier, that's not scalable. So you do need to
Mm,
outsource.
okay.
Now, again, put this in perspective of all the time. Probably talking all up, I don't know, maybe 4 hours for a half-hour show. By the time you invite your guests, do your artwork, all that kind of stuff. As far as costs go, it's not actually really that expensive, even though I'm using like Libsyn, which is not a free service. It's about, I think it's about 10 US a month or something. It's not expensive. Like
What is
most.
Libsyn? I thought you mentioned you moved off of Libsyn. Oh, no,
No,
Libsyn's
I
for
moved
podcasts.
on to
Okay,
Libsyn. So
gotcha.
yes, Libsyn's, you're gonna use Buzzsprout, so it's an equivalent to Buzzsprout is the
Okay,
easiest way. So that's where your podcast is hosted and then distributed to the other platforms.
gotcha.
That's maximum 15 US a month. I think it's a little less, but I'll go high level just so that you've got it. Then Descript's probably my most expensive part of this process, which again is about, I'm going to guess, between 30 and 40 US dollars roughly a month.
Mhm.
And then you've got, what else do I have? Podcastpage.io is probably another 10 US a month. So you're probably looking at around, I don't know, 60 US a month for all the services.
Okay,
Now,
let me
that
put this on here. So podcast platform itself is gonna be about 15 or more a month.
yeah,
I had Descript. I'm trying to find this because I'm gonna put this because I'm gonna be watching this in playback, and I know there's other gonna people gonna like, "Wait a minute, what did she say for all these things?" So Descript was for, like, the transcription and editing,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
I
That's
don't
right.
think I
And
had that.
that's generated by AI, and it's amazing, like how much it gets the transcripts really spot on.
Okay.
When I first started using it, if you ask me how long a half an hour show took, 6 hours to edit. But the AI has gotten smarter and improved, and it's just really great if you want to make some audio clips, if you want
Mhm.
to make audiograms, if you want to make shorter videos. It's literally this easy.
Okay.
Highlight,
Around $10 a
copy,
month, you
export.
said,
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
Descript? Okay.
no, I think it's a bit more expensive. I think that's probably around 30 or
I'm
40,
looking
somewhere
at
around there.
creator version is 12 a month, pro version is 24 a month, and that's
Yeah,
US.
that would be the one. So I've got the pro
Okay.
version just because I do weekly shows
Okay, so let me
and
just put this to pro.
also ones with the LinkedIn branding show.
Okay.
So
And then
I would imagine.
the other one was
Yeah.
podcastpage.io. How much are you
Yeah,
paying for that?
I think that's about 10 US, 10,
That's the
15,
10
somewhere
one.
around
Okay.
there. I think it's only 10, but again, for how easy that was to set up, it was amazing. I
Okay.
can't speak more highly of that particular platform,
Mhm.
and it's something that has, like I said, for how I look now as my show, just next level. So
Yeah.
the
And then your
cost of it,
microphone, you said, was another. I mean, we
yeah,
should have a good quality microphone before we're podcasting. I mean, you and I both have,
yes.
and mine's on like a little tripod. I'm gonna lift it up and show
Yeah.
you. I know other people have. You've got it on like an arm, you know.
I do, just because I don't have much space. So
Yeah.
my my microphone is called an Audio Technica, and it's called ATR
Mhm.
2100X. Now it was around $100 US, so I didn't spend $500-600 on a microphone. Again, back to what we started, having it in the right position is far more important than having a super duper expensive one.
Okay, good to know. And I'm gonna throw that one up on screen if I can find like the link on Amazon or some other
That's
place. I'll
fun.
throw that in there, and I'll put mine as well. I spent about $60 on my microphone.
Yeah. I
So
think
they're
that
pretty reasonable.
In the
Mhm.
US, it's probably 60 or $70. If Michelle Griffin's still listening, she recently bought one. But I think so that's Australian dollars. So in the US, it's probably 60 or 70. So it would
Okay.
be somewhere around there.
Okay, and I see you're wearing headphones, and I
I
mentioned
do.
in the pre-show, I'm like, "You're wearing headphones. Do I need headphones? Like, why are you wearing headphones? Do we need headphones for a podcast?"
It depends on how you're listening back because sometimes you can get an echo. And so you can
Mhm.
hear yourself talking if you use the speakers on the computer. And so it can be really off putting that you hear yourself talk and then it sounds like an echo. So
Mhm.
that's the only reason that I use it. I always call it's like my Princess Leia look. I felt a bit weird when I first started. I was like, I'm going to look so silly in those things. But now I don't even think about it. So
Mm.
from that perspective, if you're recording on a video, obviously having good webcam and some good lighting always helps.
Okay.
Moving away from the live also meant that people, Brenda, and you may have had this with some of your guests, the thought of being on a LinkedIn Live petrifies people. And it
Mm.
can often mean that they don't bring their best to the conversation because they're worried about what's
Yeah.
going on the video. So by taking that element out and just recording in the background,
Mm.
I'm hoping that that will free some people up to not have that concern because often they haven't done a LinkedIn Live before, some of these
Okay.
people. And so I want to set my guest up as the absolute hero. That's my job. But in fairness, here's the thing. I find podcasting so hard because I
Yeah.
hate being a host. I love being a guest.
Aw,
Because I tell you
there's the
why.
irony of it right there,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right? It's a bit different with the LinkedIn branding show because it's the 2 of us talking, but on my
Yeah.
own, here's what happens. I spend my whole time sitting there doing a lot of nodding, like, we've done in this conversation.
Yeah.
You've had to listen to me do all the talking. I become the expert in the show, which is, fine, but for the amount of time that you're putting into it, are you getting the same reward? And
Sure.
so if I was to maybe go back, would I do more episodes by myself? Absolutely, and that's what I'm gonna do this year.
Mhm.
That's a thing for me, making sure that I get out and do some stuff by myself. But
Mhm.
you make the guest look like the expert as opposed to you get to shine your expertise. And
That's
that
true.
is for consultants and coaches, if you're doing an interview style, for me, it keeps me accountable. So I have guests, so I make sure I do it. But it also means that in this particular case on your show, I become the expert. And, that's the trade off that we've got to think about. By avoiding doing it by yourself, you make the other person the expert. And is that a good use of your time? That's something that I'm kind of toying with. So my show will be a mix of things this year.
I'm gonna drop that on screen because that was if there was like a mic drop where I could like drop into a pan right now, I'd like drop into a pan because that was I need like a pie tin where I could drop like something into there. But
Boom, mic
solo
drop.
podcast, this is brilliant. Solo
Mm.
podcast where it's just you talking, you're sharing your expertise. When it's an interview, you're sharing their expertise. So I think there might be something that's to be said, Michelle, with having a blend of both because you want your audience to get to know you, know, like, and trust you. And by the way, I was thinking about this today. People, and they always say people do business with people they know, like, and trust. I'm going to add the word value to that because people do business. And I'm thinking of like, I'm going to pay you for your products and services if I know you, I like you, I trust you, and I see the value that you deliver. I think that's a missing element from a lot of us. But when you're interviewing other people, you're sharing their expertise. So it shows that you can bring people in. It shows that you're surrounding yourself from other people and you're learning yourself. But I kind of like the blend of both of those. What do you think?
In my particular thoughts for this year, absolutely a blend, for exactly those reasons. You're seen as the quality of the guests that you come on, and choosing quality guests is really important. And that's different
Mhm.
to popular guests. So the topic and adding value is far more important than the number of followers someone has.
Mhm.
You also need to keep in mind the thing that I've learned, and you might have noticed this with your LinkedIn lives, is I had an expectation that a podcast guest would come on, we'd co-produce,
Yeah.
send some stuff out, and they would help promote. And
Right.
that's
They
not
would
what
do
happened.
marketing for it, right?
It doesn't happen. And it was maybe an unfair expectation of me, but I could never understand why you would invest time to come on a podcast and then not go and tell other people that you'd done it.
Mhm.
But people don't do it. And it's no judgment on any of my previous
Yeah.
guests. It's
It's just
just
the
something
reality,
that
right? Yeah.
I had an unreal expectation. It was on my side, not on that side. And so just being clear around that then made me go, well, if I'm going to put cost or time, because that's the trade off, you pay someone else or you lose your own time. So
Yeah.
if I'm doing this and I'm not in my zone of genius, then why shouldn't I get the returns on it?
Sure.
And so that's what I guess playing around with in my head right now is how do I get the returns for the effort that I'm putting in more than potentially my guests?
Yeah.
Because if they're
Can I
not
share with
telling
you
people about it,
Yeah, can I share
then
with you one person and I would say that is definitely the rule as a whole. I mean, I've
right.
found that consistently too. And I'm always like when interview people, I always give them the pre-show, here's the links, here's the post if you want to, and I always tag them and their company and if they do it great and if not, no big deal. And I do the same thing after the show. I give them the links and the
Yeah.
playbacks and a handful of people do it. One exception to the rule, I'm going to give him a shout out right now. Roy Sexton. He is a marketer who works in the field of legal marketing. If you book Roy on your show, he is going to market the heck out of it beforehand. He's going to market like in the show, he's going to take pictures and do all this stuff. He's going to market the heck out of it afterwards. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I wish every guest could be like Roy Sexton. He's that good of a guest. But I think the
Uh,
reality is most people don't. They come on because you've tapped them as an expert to be on the show and they expect it's your show. You do, the heavy lifting, the marketing, and,
correct.
maybe I share it with my company, but that's about the extent of it. So I'm curious, Michelle, are you no longer doing LinkedIn Lives? Are you just doing
So,
podcasts now?
as an extension of this conversation, my LinkedIn Lives, I'll be doing just me. So, that's an
Mm.
adamant, if I'm going to put the effort to inviting, using my invite credits, and I'll probably end up doing some on my personal account this year just for reach, just for building my own personal brand some more. From
Mhm,
that perspective, if I put the effort into creating the live for all those reasons you just mentioned, and again, no judgments on the guest, it's just the reality of how it works,
mhm.
is well, why not just put me there? Why not put me
Right.
in that spotlight? And I've grown into this. This is not something that I could have done a year ago. But this year, I'm like, well, if I do the invites, I do all the effort, I do the editing, and it's a cost because even if I do it myself, there's an opportunity cost for what didn't I create for my business? When I
Mm,
charge people, a couple of $1,000s to do training, if I'm
mhm,
not doing stuff that gets more of that, then that costs me even more to do this podcast. So it's
mm,
not the $60 a month for the cost and the 3 hours that I can
right,
handle internally. It's the what else should I have been doing to grow my business that podcasting takes me away from.
mhm,
And that's the case for getting someone else externally to do it. But again, it has to be, cost effective
okay,
and scalable ultimately.
yeah,
So LinkedIn Lives, only me. guests on the podcast will record behind the scenes. So we've got videos, so I can create some different clips, which
Mhm.
have started to, I guess, set some templates up because I wanted to create different things all the time. But this year I've just started, I'm playing around with some from our show that we did together so that I've got a template. So next time when I do it, it takes me less time because
Okay.
templated formats for show notes, templated formats for questions, the whole show so people know what to expect, I
Mhm.
think is key to success as well. Again,
So
something
so I
that
have a
I've
question too. The podcast we just did together, and I'm getting super excited. I'm like, I'm gonna market the heck out of it. And I my intern, I'm like, I sent her email, and I'm like, I was just on this podcast. I want you to clip it out and start marketing. But I'm like, wait a minute. I think Michelle asked me if I was going to do something. Now, do any of your services provide that? Like the what are they called? Audiograms, where it's like a
Yeah,
short
so
version.
Descript is really simple to make audiograms. So I created a quick one just to test and see what it would do for our show yesterday,
Mhm.
which I posted on the LinkedIn for B2B growth showcase page on LinkedIn,
Okay.
just so I could play around with it. But I want to get to a point where I can give people short clips so that
Mhm.
they can use it and make it easy. Now, I think my job as a host is to make it easy for other people. I don't expect them to take what I've done, but Descript is the tool. I can't tell you how easy it makes things for short videos,
Mhm.
subtitles, audiograms. It's all in the one place.
Okay, good to know. So I should not have her do that. I'll wait for you, or I
I
could
can
use
look.
what you've already clipped out.
Look, there's the other thing. I can send
Yeah.
you the edited video so that you've got that. It makes life easier because, in subtitles, and that's fine. I'm very happy to share all of that information. I think that's
Okay.
some of the other things to keep in mind. How do you make it easy for the guest to help promote? And again, this is at the start of this year something that I'm thinking about what's worth the effort because why go and create it all if no one promotes, right?
Absolutely.
So I know
Yeah.
you're different. I absolutely know you're different. I know you get it and you will help, promote.
Mhm.
But I also know that there's probably 8 out of 10 that won't. So why do create stuff? And I
Mhm.
know that they don't because when I do it for every show that I'm on religiously, like for me, it's like just not a negotiable.
Yeah.
People come back and they're like, "Oh my god, Michelle, you're amazing." And I'm like,
Yeah. You do
"Why
the
are
stuff
you
that they do.
doing this?"
Alright, I'm gonna shift gears right now, and I promise I'm like, people aren't gonna listen for more than an hour. I'm like, but here you and I are, and we're coming up on the hour, and I wanna make sure that we shift gears just a little bit, and if anyone is watching right now and they have a question for Michelle, I'm gonna drop this back up on the screen here, but if you have a comment or a question, drop it in comments now, whether you're watching this in live or in playback, because I will be sharing the links with Michelle, and I know she'll watch them, to see if there's any folks
Of
that are
course.
coming in here later. As we were on the show today, I noticed that we did have a couple of comments and questions coming in. One from Michelle Griffin, and Michelle is saying she made a free page on Podpage. Are you familiar with Podpage, Michelle?
No, Michelle looks after all of our other side on that, but it would be something pretty similar, I would imagine. I haven't looked at that particular one. I probably should since it's for our show. But from that perspective, look, all I would say is having something that's quality that makes the show look professional just takes things up that other level. And I'm always a fan of free plans.
Mhm.
So anything that you can do that makes things look good, so that if you're having guests, they can look
Mhm.
at it and go, "Oh, these guys are professional."
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
like
gonna,
a real thing. Yeah.
yeah, so,
Okay.
from that
Okay.
perspective, but again, it comes down to what you think will help. There's free versions of most things depending on how much quantity you're putting out, and I think even Podcast Page IO, has some stuff as well that's cheaper.
Yeah.
So again, it just comes down to how often are you doing things, how much. I forgot to add, obviously, I use StreamYard as well, similar to you, to
I
record
was gonna
the
yeah, the recording,
audio.
so you do it on StreamYard, not on Zoom, because Zoom's not the best
The
quality audio or
quality's not
video.
great,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've just found even recording it in different places, the quality's not great, so that for
Mhm.
me, and now now StreamYard records locally, the audio
Yeah.
as well, so if something happens with the internet, then you should still be saved, so.
Okay, good to know. And I see Sue Griffey, she's also a fan of Descript. She says
Oh,
Descript can now more easily do captioning within the editing, saving me so much
yeah,
time. Sue, do you have a podcast that I'm not aware of, or are you using Descript for something else? Drop a comment and let us know if you could. And I know there's
yeah,
been a few people like Sue and others who jumped on a little bit late. The great thing is, if you go into the LinkedIn event and you add it to your calendar, I do this all the time, Michelle. I like add it to my calendar, even if I can't attend,
yeah,
because then I'll be able to find the link to watch the playback later. And some shows, like I know Michelle, you do the same thing. You'll live stream it to two channels like
Yep.
LinkedIn and YouTube. So we can always get on a YouTube playlist to watch it. But after we're done, you can certainly watch it again, or you can share it along, all kinds of good stuff on here. And let's see, Michelle also mentioned to have a keyword subtitle. So I guess that again goes back to the point of SEO that you were referring to, Michelle.
Absolutely. Just think, what would someone type in a search bar that you want them to find your podcast, because it is the most amazing podcast that they need to listen to. And as soon as they start from that first episode, they can hear themselves, hear their problems that you solve, because they're listening to it to, in this case, education and solve challenges that they've got somewhere, off the podcast. And so
Mhm.
the more that you can help to do that, obviously these aren't necessarily entertaining podcasts as such, but if they're fun, that's great. But ultimately, people are there to get educated and learn. So make sure that it's immediately obvious that they're in the right place, that they've
Mhm.
come to the right channel, and that they're going to get the answers to what they're after.
Good to
And the
know.
other
And
thing,
yeah.
which we haven't spoken about,
Yeah.
podcast headings and titles for the episodes. I am rubbish at it. Michelle Griffin is amazing at it. The ones that she comes up with for the LinkedIn branding show are why I think we have, again, so much good listening, like the
Mhm.
numbers there. But
Okay.
I think, again, it's another way to capture attention, to make sure someone clicks on it. And
Mm.
so don't underestimate the power of a good heading for your podcast episode.
Right.
Again, that's a work in progress for me, but it's really important. And I think it's probably, you listen to podcasts, so what makes you click on it to actually listen to it? So capture attention.
Good point. And I've heard of, there's a website, I don't know if you've heard of it, answerthepublic.com,
Yeah,
where you can look
yeah,
up what question you can type in like the word LinkedIn and then see what questions are people asking about LinkedIn. So you get human language
yeah,
in your questions. I'm going to move off back to Sue. Sue mentions she's using Descript for captioning.
yeah.
Love it. And by the way, thank you to the powers that be at LinkedIn for finally giving captioning to videos that we're uploading natively. I think it's so important, both for the
Mm.
hearing impaired community, but also for those folks that are listening with the sound off, because we can read and see what they're saying on there. Michelle, I want to start to shift gears here and wind our conversation down. At the beginning of the show, I had asked you to tell us about your business. So remind us again, if you could, what are the products and services? What are the things that you do as a part of your business for those that might be interested in working with you?
Yeah, look, it's really, I'll keep it really simple. I work with B2B businesses, especially marketing teams and social media agencies, to help them sell more on LinkedIn without spamming. So, how do I do that? I've got a LinkedIn growth social selling masterclass, and I have a company page admin training course. And essentially, they're the two pieces of how I help people. And I just really want people to focus on, how do you get more growth out of LinkedIn, instead of just spending lots and lots of time on there and not getting any leads, because that makes me cry. I don't know
Mhm.
about you, Brenda, but there's a lot of people right now that are hurting, and it's a financial year that might bring some doom and gloom. And so, I think it's really important that people get their ducks in a row on LinkedIn, because
Mm.
there's plenty of opportunities if you get there. So yeah, work with businesses, and yeah, that's me done.
And then I got from you your, and I love that you have these all in one, because my next question would be, how do we get a hold of you? And if we go to this webpage, goodtradingco.com.au/quick dash links, I'll put that in the show notes as well. People can, but I love that you have everything all in one here, different ways of getting a hold of you.
Look, it's a simple like Linktree or other services like that, but I have it on my website. So hopefully if you go to my website and find this page, then you'll have a poke around and may find something else that's of interest. So that's why I created it. But yeah, the other podcast that I do, I also created a Spotify playlist, which is all my guest appearances. So you can hear me talk about company pages inside and out all day, every day, pretty much. But for me, it's like my trophy cabinet. That's what I call it.
I love it. I created a YouTube playlist very similarly of
I've got one of
people.
those. I've got
Yeah.
one of those, but have your Spotify playlist for your podcast as well. I haven't You can't do it on other platforms, which is why it's there.
Mhm.
But I just find it brilliant for saying to people, look, I can't help you. You want answers to questions. Here's my most recent conversation that I had.
Yeah, it's
Go and have a
perfect.
listen.
I love it. And then here's your LinkedIn. I'm going to pull it up on screen. And for those folks that are interested in connecting with you, are you open to connection requests or
Or
what's your preference there?
I prefer connections. I hate that follow button, and I use that word intentionally. I
Yeah.
miss connecting with people. I miss having those conversations. So please, I only have it there because I like creator mode. It's part of my other business goals, but please do reach out and connect. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
that you're listening to this show. If you've got any other questions, don't hesitate to ask or drop them in the chat, and I'll make sure that other people can get those answers as well.
And I got to give you a shout out for your branding too. Inside your header, you have both of your books, the LinkedIn branding book, which was written, co-authored by Michelle Griffin, and Business Gold, which was co-authored by Lanier Johnson. By the way, if you all have been watching and paying very close attention, you may notice, let me see if I can get this right.
Did you do it?
Let's see, this hand right here, and then like right over here. It's hard to point when you're doing this. I've got both of Michelle's books in
Oh,
my background behind me here. And this is part of what I do. I mean, as a marketer, I always everything behind me is intentional. And you can see my book that's up here as well. Everything behind me is intentional. When I interview different people, I have their books. And I was on an interview earlier today with Charlie Wahlberg, who's affiliated with TEDx Detroit. And I have my little TEDx Detroit, statue
love it.
thing in the back. You got to like stage these things. But I love that you market yourself, your business, your books, and I've really gotten so many great tips from you here today, Michelle. So as we start to wrap up our conversation, any final comments for folks if there are coaches and consultants thinking about starting a podcast?
Just because it's easy to get started doesn't mean that you should. You really need to, before you dive in, like I did, go back and think, what is your intended goal? Maybe it's to make more money down the track. Maybe it's you want to write a book and this is part of it. Like there can be all kinds of different goals, but have that in mind, have one audience in mind, the problem that you solve for them, and just talk about that in as many different ways as possible. And that's what you'll get known for. And it will reinforce your coaching and consulting brand as opposed to what I did in the beginning, which was just confuse people. So the time up front is well spent. I think it's worth speaking to experts to get this knowledge up front. Hopefully I've helped people just by, my learning by making mistakes. I've shared them here today because I'd really love for people that have been thinking about it, give it a go. That's what I'd say. Podcasting is weird. It feels
Mhm.
like you're talking to no one. So unlike social media, you get comments, you get likes. Social
True.
media, you literally talk into the abyss and you never know who's listening. And so if you are a podcast listener, drop a review for people so that they know that you're out there, reach out and connect. It makes such a difference to encourage it because in the beginning, Brenda, you might get like 30 listens, 50 lessons, maybe. And you're thinking, what's the point? Right.
Right.
And so you've got to be patient, but having that narrow focus will just bring those results forward quicker. And yeah, that's my advice. So thank you for letting me share my little journey to podcasting. I hope it's helped. Like I said, I pretty much made every mistake that you possibly can, and still learning. But I hope that it's helped some other people and maybe inspired them to get started, more importantly.
I think so. It's definitely
Yeah.
inspired me. And by the way, if you have
Mhm.
been inspired by this conversation, this is a great conclusion for us today. Could you do us a favor, wherever you're watching or listening this, could you share this along with someone, whether you want to share it on social media or if you're here watching it on LinkedIn, click on that share button and share it along and tell people something that you learned by watching this show, which is all about podcasting. Michelle, this has been a delight chatting with you. I know you're just getting your Wednesday started. I'm winding down my Tuesday here in the States. But it was such a delight having you on the show, and I know we'll be talking again very soon.
I know. We've had 3 times this year already, so can't wait for the next time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. All right. Until then, Michelle, it's been a pleasure. And everyone watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all on LinkedIn. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Cheers.
Whoops, wrong one. Hold on.